Adrian, I know one of your guilty pleasure favorite movies is Armageddon. Is that right?
That is true, yeah.
I, I feel I'm such a good friend. I remember that.
I more am calling out the guilty pleasure. I think it's a liked movie.
Okay. Um, did you know that NASA shows that film during their management training program? New managers are given the task of trying to spot as many errors as possible. At least 168 have been found.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely egregious. And a fun fact on top of that is that they actually show The Martian as accurate. It is extremely accurate, both the book and the movie.
Which I don't get, because they would have seen that storm coming like miles away, and they would have known about it. It just doesn't make sense.
Well, Andy Ware, the author, is an ex-JPL engineer that worked on the rovers and things like that, and he worked really closely with NASA.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
On like the entire book. So they show Armageddon and The Martian. It sounds like a great job. Your orientation is two great movies for different reasons.
It's just crazy that astronaut got billions of dollars in subsidies to become a potato farmer. So, I mean... Anywho, welcome back to the Drive Back Podcast. I'm Garrett.
And I'm Adrian.
And today we have a First-Timers, which is what, Adrian?
Where we both haven't seen it, so we both watched it for the first time.
That's absolutely right. And today we've got a movie that you picked for this episode, which is The Deep House. What made you pick The Deep House?
That it was a horror movie, and it had some neat stuff in the imagery, like the marketing material. Just seemed like something that I'd be into, and I love like indie horror films and stuff like that, so it seemed right up my alley.
Perfect, absolutely. That's an easy reason. I had no idea anything about this movie going in. I think we had talked about this before, last week, actually. Did you know anything about it going in?
I mean, I knew the concept. Like, I had no idea what the plot was or anything like that, but I knew it was a horror movie that took place underwater.
Gotcha. Well, let's go ahead and jump right into today's movie, which is The Deep House. Released in 2021, it was directed by Alexandra Bastillo and Julian Maury. Hopefully it's not the Maury from the Maury Povich show. And stars Camille Rowe, James Jagger, and Eric Savin. A young and modern couple who go to France to explore an underwater house and share their findings on social media undergo a serious change of plans when the couple enters the interior of a strange house located at the bottom of a lake. In their presence awakes a dark spirit hidden in the house. Well, that's pretty much the entire thing wrapped up into one sentence.
That's the whole movie right there.
That's a run-on sentence, but that's okay. So, Adrian, this was your pick. What are some spoiler-free thoughts before we dive in?
Oh, I guess my microphone's like super far away. Has that been wild this whole time?
I don't hear a difference, actually. That's a good microphone.
Wait a second. Am I doing this correctly? Hold on, everyone. Yeah, no, that microphone was like 10 feet from my face, and it sounds the same. Wow, okay. That is crazy. Yeah, I think this movie just in general is a pass upon watching it. I had heard pretty good things about it from like the TikTok community and people that claim to love horror movies. But I claim to like horror movies, and this is definitely one that I would not recommend to people unless you're really looking for you're like scraping the bottom of your horror barrel of films that exist.
Yeah, I can see this being like recommended because it's free with a streaming service, and if you're looking for some cheap jump scares on a Friday night, it'll give them to you. You know, I think this movie, it has some strong elements to it. There's definitely there is a vision there, a visual vision for what this movie wants to be. I think the story is quite lacking and isn't very interesting. It has some problems that we'll dive into, and it's just the story just isn't that good. So
yeah, I think that's the weakest point, is that the story just never really gets the steam I think it deserves. I think the concept's totally there. It just kind of falls flat in the storytelling department.
Gotcha. Well, let's go ahead and dive into some spoiler thoughts. This movie is available to stream on Amazon Prime if you have a subscription there. So if you want to watch it, that's where you can do it. Now, diving into today's film. I keep saying diving in. I don't know why.
I was gonna say, let's get a counter going on how many times you say dive in.
Right? If I'm not lazy when it comes to editing this weekend, I'll put a counter in. Yeah, I mean, I think we both agree that the story is the weakest point here. Why do we think that is?
Because the writers didn't do good. I don't know. I think the writing just as a whole, like, it doesn't really seem as finished. Like, it literally seemed like an idea, and then that's, like, as far as it got, and it almost seemed like they were filming it by the seat of their pants. Like, they didn't really have the end planned out. It felt like it just kind of all kept adding on, like, scene after scene.
Mm-hmm.
And then they were like, wouldn't it be cool if this happened? So then they filmed that scene, and then they're like, well, what's the ending?
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, this. And then it's like, oh, okay, fine. Like, it just it seems all really haphazardly put together.
Yeah, I mean, which is kind of a shame because there are hints that this movie has some great ideas in it, right? Like, you've got the cinematography underwater is pretty great. And the fact that they were able to get a house like that to look as pristine as it does underwater is crazy. And I do think that from a visual standpoint, not necessarily a story or a character standpoint, the YouTuber side of it works. It looks like this, like the parts of it are a blog, or a vlog, excuse me. And that visually works. It story-wise, it doesn't, because there is not a single likable character in this entire movie.
At all. Even the guy you're not supposed to like, he's the guy you're not supposed to like is probably the most likable character just based off, like, his background. Like, you have the most interest in them.
Yeah, are you specifically speaking of the son or of the main?
Yeah, the son.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Like, I feel like he's supposed to be this creepy, like, oh, like, we don't like that guy. But he has the most interesting dynamic in the group. Like, I want to know more about him. I don't really care about the two main protagonists at all.
Yeah.
In fact, the main guy's kind of a douche, like, the whole movie.
He's literally just a toxic guy. Like,
yeah,
he has, like, some horrible moments with his girlfriend, and then, like, in the car on the way there, he's, like, getting all affectionate and grabbing her knee and stuff. And if she didn't grab his hand back, I'd have been like, dude, that's just, like, super rapey. Like,
yeah,
it doesn't,
very odd.
It doesn't really work that well. And it just kind of permeates throughout the whole thing. I mean, to the point that when he turns, you know, like, the house takes control of him or whatever, I didn't really notice a change in character.
It took a couple exchanges of, like, a couple sentences back and forth for me to be like, oh, gotcha, like, he's now under this effect. But I do want to talk about one thing that I really did like, which was probably the best moment in the whole movie, is when the couple corpse downstairs in the basement starts animating for the first time, and start floating after the two main characters. That, to me, seems like what the whole movie was built around, was someone had a really cool idea for that shot, because that shot pays off immensely. That shot is creepy, it's got a great vibe, it's great, well-paced, it's surprising, it's, like, totally a curveball, and I think it was super well done. And then immediately after that shot, once they start chasing them through the house, that's odd.
Yeah.
Like, it stops having the scare factor, and it's just gone. So it's like they had it for a moment, they literally caught lightning for a second, and then they just could not keep it for the rest of the movie.
Also, just literally, it does not make sense that why they're still alive, or, like, why they're able to do all this.
Well, the devil.
Which, it's such a terrible.
I'm not talking about that they're Satanists. I'm talking about that if they're devil worshippers, then that's
I'll get to that. I'll get to that in a second. But, like, it like, they never did, like, a ritual though. They were tortured and killed and left to drown or whatever. But, like, they never did, like, a ritual to come back or anything like that. They were left there to die. There's no reason that they, you know, shouldn't be able to do that. Unless it's something in the house, which they do kind of tease that the house is really the entity that does everything.
But I think
you could really read into it and say it's that.
What would have made that a lot better is if they did take the cross off the door, the big old cross, which was crazy and obviously you don't do that if you discover that underground. But I feel like it would have been cool because there was like that sigil on the ground, the pentagram, that if like they had opened that or something, like that they let something out or something to build the story a bit more.
Maybe.
But yeah, they don't. The things just come alive and she gets caught up in chains for some reason.
It's kind of like they had this really cool idea for a location and a concept, and then just failed to capitalize on it.
And maybe that's a money thing. Like, it didn't seem ultra high budget. It definitely wasn't cheap, but it definitely wasn't like insanely expensive either. But maybe it was a budget thing. Like, maybe they just could not get the funding to do what they wanted. I don't know. But that does bring me to another real quick scene that I want to talk about that I did like too, was when the Jesus on the cross, when they take it off the wall, his eyes are closed. And then when they swim back by later, the eyes are open. And I thought that was pretty cool. Just of like a little detail that they don't really call out too much. I think he goes like, what the? But you don't really, like, if you're not looking, you don't really see it.
Yeah.
But I really liked that. I thought that was cool.
It's interesting, but it's like, again, there's no reason that should happen unless you're reading into it that the house is manipulating reality around them, because it does. It closes off the grate at the top how they get in, and
absolutely. But I think it would have made more sense for my high school English teacher if the scene was reversed, where they took it off. They took Jesus off with his eyes open, and then when they saw it, his eyes were closed, like he couldn't witness what was about to happen
or protect them.
Yeah, like that. So I think it would have been better if it was the other way around. I think it would have been more startling of like, even Jesus can't see in this house. I think that would have been more interesting. That's the new tagline for, like, no one can hear you scream in space.
Even Jesus can't see in this house. Yeah, it's stupid, and that leads me to my point. One of the things that I think I was talking to you about last night is that it's kind of on the topic of the villain characters of this movie, the family, and this movie continues to perpetuate a stereotype that is very harmful to a lot of people, that it portrays Satanists as child-targeting, ritualistic killers, and that is not what Satanism is. It's actually a core tenet of many of the organizations, that you do not target children at all. They're a protected group. There's after-school programs and everything. So continuing to use it as this easy target, and it feels like it's incredibly offensive to a lot of people. And it's not only this movie, it was also like The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, and don't label it as Satanism, because that's not what it is. It's devil worship. It's demon worship. It's things like that are more religiously based. But the problem is that people are going to come with a negative perception away from it anyway. It's super frustrating.
Yeah, and I will say that just like, right, there was that whole like the Satan hunt or Satanist hunt, like, that happened in the 90s, like, where people just thought like D&D.
Oh, the Satanic Panic.
Yeah, the Satanic Panic, like that, I don't think has ever really gone away. I think it has to like a large extent, but I think there's still people that just associate those things as the same, of like that type of activity and believing in what you believe in. And I think it's just unfortunate that term hasn't changed, but I don't know enough about it to like go into the details of all the differences. But yeah, I think it's also easy for a director to just say that because everybody gets what you mean. Like, unfortunately, it's still pretty in like the social jargon that Satanism is like a negative thing, unfortunately. So I think from like a writing standpoint, going back to that, it's just like saying that sums up what you're trying to say. Unfortunately,
it is a social vocabulary thing, right? Like, we still like, I hate the word, like, I've actively tried to purge it from my system, but like the word retarded is like that as well, or gay, using that as a bad term or bad descriptive. It's the same exact thing. It's targeting minority groups that don't need that kind of targeting.
And until we start actually reframing the way that films portray it, it won't go away.
Yeah. So, well, off of our soapbox for a second. I mean, I do want to talk about the positives to this movie, though. The cinematography, which we already kind of discussed, like, the idea that this is underwater is really cool. And even for someone like me who has thalassophobia and just is really scared of being in underwater situations like that, I mean, the house itself doesn't really scare me because it's a closed environment. They've got air tanks on, whatever. But like the end sequence is horrifying because the idea of looking straight up at the sunlight coming through the surface of the water is like it's a vision from my nightmares.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't even have to be, scared of open ocean to look at that and be like, oh, that's horrifying.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And then I want to talk about one thing that I wish happened, and then we'll get back to the end real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Is that I wish with the house, how you talked about how it's more of a character, or it could be if you really read into it. I wish that they leaned into that. I think it would have been cool if like rooms started disappearing or changing, like it became a maze. And then maybe like there's rooms like they never really did like, oh, this like didn't the wall end here? There shouldn't be a room here. Like I think it would have been cool if they kind of like leaned into that a little more and kind of just played up that like changing house kind of idea. I thought that would have been really cool.
Or else or maybe some sort of like psychosocial like infection. Right? Like the house wants people to come there because it wants to infect them. So it lets them record everything. And as they go on, they become more and more infected and it lets them go. So they can post a video online and they tell them exactly where it is and they have more people come to see it and more people get infected.
Yeah, I think it just needed like that twist. Like it needed that extra oomph to make it super interesting. But then to get back to the ending real quick is that, right, bodies float. She was not weighed down by anything. Mm-hmm. She had ditched all fear, but she never surfaced.
Well, so they were deeper down, and you don't like when you float. You're not just like immediately rising to the surface. If you're that far down, you do have to swim up to get to the surface.
No, absolutely. I'm saying like after she died or she didn't make it, eventually that body would surface.
Yeah,
but it didn't. Or
at least not in the movie.
Yeah, but so for me, that means that the house won. Like it still got her in its door frame or whatever.
Yeah, I put her on the mantle. It's kind of weird. Like I like darker endings, and I wish more movies had them because the hero doesn't always get away. You just have to present a good reason for why it does that. I like for example, I like the controversial ending of The Mist. Like I think it's just suitably dark. It's just what I like. This movie is the exact opposite. I think it does not earn it, even though it does set up the fact that she can't hold her air that long.
Yeah, I just don't think it's brought up enough to justify that being the big moment.
Yes, and I have to give full credit to the YouTube channel Foundflix here, because I watched his ending explained video after we do this, or after I watched it for the first time, and the way he explained it was he went through the house is the enemy theory, I guess you could have about the movie, and that the house exploits your fears, and obviously the boyfriend's fears were not getting the followers he wanted, so he became a part of a community. That's exactly what happened to him. And then the girlfriend's fears were letting her boyfriend down. And so instead of telling the truth, be like, yeah, I can only hold my air for a minute and a half, she had to lie and say 3 minutes. And so the house exploits that to win, and she realizes it halfway up, which, again, it's reading into it a little too much, but at least it's a satisfying kind of mental, like, I guess fan fiction way of,
I guess, yeah, if you to me that's just justifying something that doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say I completely agree with you on the dark endings. Like The Descent has one of the best alternative endings of a horror movie to me ever. In the theatrical release, she gets out and she's in the car and they do a little jump scare. In the alternative release, they show her still in the cave and she's gone insane. Like she just imagined that ending happening. And it's suitable. I think that movie earns it. It's a very dark film. It's very insanity inducing. Like it earns that. This movie does not do that. When she did not make it, both Cassie and I were like, oh.
Yeah.
And then the credits roll and you're like, oh. Now, quick question, did you wait till after the credits?
I did not. So there is a scene. You'll have to explain the scene to us, because that means having to go back and watch it.
Yeah, so the final scene after the credits is the guy, the son.
Oh, yeah, I remember this from the Foundflix video. Yeah, but go ahead.
Coming back, and two young women are going to go diving there again to basically tell you that he does this professionally. Like, he brings people to the house because he has to continue to feed it.
He's continuing his family's legacy, yeah.
Yeah, but it's literally like 10 seconds, and it doesn't add to the plot at all. It doesn't set up another movie. It doesn't do anything. It just is like super kind of annoying, actually. I wish those 10 seconds would have been for more info in the main film.
Yeah.
So yeah, just super kind of mundane overall. But yeah, definitely, to circle all the way back, I guess my final thoughts are that, like, I think this movie is super passable unless, like Garrett said, it's free and you don't want to like buy anything, and you're maybe out of horror movies, like you've seen all the really good ones, and you're looking for something unique. Idea is cool. Execution is absolutely terrible in this movie, so I give it a 40.
Wow, yeah, we're actually pretty close. So I said that it has some fun scares. It has a horrifying locale and interesting cinematography, but the story is only skin deep. Its characters suck, and it doesn't quite interest me past its technical merits. So because of that, I had to give it a 39. So we were really close.
Yeah.
I mean, am I glad that I watched it from a technical point of view? Maybe. But like, this just falls into the category of the movies that are made for it, for a little bit of money. Even though this one clearly had some money behind it, they were doing all this underwater stuff, and it's just there to scare some teenagers in a theater. But this didn't even come out in theaters. This was an Epix original movie, which I'm sure that platform's dead. But this is probably the movie that killed it.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, this is something we had talked about last night. We said that if this was like the director's first film, if this was a student film, it's really impressive, actually, visually and technically. It's not. They did one of the horrible Texas Chainsaw Massacre sequels called Leatherface back in the 2000s, and they also did a Shudder original movie I think 2020, which actually had some decent reviews. So it might
called Shudder.
No, it was on the platform Shudder.
Because there's this movie called Shudder about the camera that I actually do enjoy. That's a bit of a guilty pleasure. I thought it was that.
I do remember that movie, yeah, because I think it used a similar sound effect as Texas Chainsaw Massacre in the trailer, and it was kind of creepy. But that's going to bring us to an end for this first-timers. Adrian, where can people go if they want to learn more about us, when we go live, and all that kind of stuff?
The Drive Back podcast on any platform, whether that be like Spotify, Apple Podcast, Overcast, whatever you got. We post every Monday on all platforms, and then on YouTube, every once in a while, you'll get a little tidbit, like a Hansel and Gretel breadcrumb. We'll post it out of cycle, and that's going to be bonus content like tier lists, movie collections. I think Garrett's working on one of those. Just stuff like that.
Absolutely correct. And next week, we've got a bit of a special one. We got a show and tell, which is some of our favorite episodes to do, where each one of us picks a movie that the other one has to watch for the first time. This actually contains one of the ones for the first time ever that we have watched together for your first time. We watched it.
How did we do show and tell then?
Well, no. So we've always, it's always been where I recommend a movie for Adrian to watch, and Adrian recommends a movie for me to watch. I'm saying this is the first one where the movie I selected and that you had to watch
to be there while I watched
with you. Yes.
Yeah.
Which that's the first time that's ever happened. I'd love to do that more. I think that's a lot of fun. But next week we're going to have a show and tell. Adrian's pick is the sci-fi anime movie Appleseed, which is really interesting. That one is only available to rent through Apple Movies, I think. So
yeah, it's obscure. It's definitely from my childhood, so it's hard to find. It didn't have the staying power that Final Fantasy did or anything.
Yeah, it looks like it's from around that same time period, so which is going to be kind of cool. And then my selection was the parody of 70s blaxploitation films Black Dynamite, which is available to stream on HBO Max. So if you want to get ahead of the curve and watch those before next week, that is where they are available to do so. And then we got some really fun episodes coming up, so it's going to get pretty fun pretty quick. But thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We love you so much, and we will see you next time here on The Drive Back. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Drive Back. Make sure to be on the lookout for new episodes every Monday, and make sure to follow us on social media.